Luke 23:32-49. 2 other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there, along with the other criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing." And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, "He saved others. Let him save himself if he is God's Messiah, the chosen one." The soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine and said, "If you are the King of the Jews, save yourself." There was a written notice above him which read, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other criminal rebuked him. "Don't you fear God," he said, "since you are under the same sentence. We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus answered him, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m, for the sun stopped shining, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Jesus called out with a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." When he had said this, he breathed his last. Then the centurion, seeing what had happened, praised God and said, "Surely this was a righteous man." When all the people who had gathered to witness this sight saw what had took place, they beat their breasts and went away. But all those who knew him, including the woman who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance watching these things. This is the word of the Lord.
All right, so we're wrapping up this series, a 6-week series called Why Jesus? And this is part 6 of the 6-part series. All the others are on the YouTube channel and the Facebook page, so if you've missed any, you can go back and get them there. And the question we've been looking at over these last 5 weeks, and we will conclude today, is why would you follow Jesus? Why would you choose to follow Jesus? Because following Jesus is really inconvenient. It messes with your life. It's not easy. And we've seen that the Christian faith rises and falls on just one question. What do you make of Jesus of Nazareth? What do you make of Jesus of Nazareth? And in answering that question, what do you make of Jesus of Nazareth, the issue is not, the big issue is not, is there a God, or can I believe the whole of the Bible, but do Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, what we now call the Gospels, those first 4 books of the New Testament, do Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John provide reliable sources and bear a faithful witness to a verifiable account of actual events? In other words, are they describing stuff that really happened? Just one of them. And if just one of them is a reliable source of actual events, then what Jesus said about himself and what Jesus did probably happened. And it's true. And what Jesus did, if what Jesus did and said is really true and really happened, then we must lean in. We must pay close attention to what Jesus did and to what Jesus said, because then it becomes vitally important that we understand him. And this is true whether you profess to have faith in God or don't, or whether you believe anything else in the rest of the Bible or not. For this, those are important questions. They're not unimportant questions. But for this, they're not the question. We are journeying through one of the accounts of the life of Jesus, the book of Luke. It's the 3rd book in the New Testament. It's named after its author. Luke was a companion of the Apostle Paul. He was a 2nd-generation Christian. He never met Jesus. But he met a lot of people who knew Jesus, and he took an inordinate amount of time he went to great trouble and great lengths to document the life of a peasant itinerant rabbi who lived in the first century in Israel, Palestine, and who was crucified by the Romans. And he says at the start of his gospel in Luke 1, verses 1 to 2, he says, I'm not the only one who has done this. He says, many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us. In other words, the things that have taken place with us. So not 100 years in the past, not 200 years ago. In our lifetime, these things took place while we were alive. And the people with whom and amongst whom they took place are still alive. They're still around. I spoke to them. I interacted with them. Just as they were handed down, he says, to us by those who were the first eyewitnesses and servants of the word. So Luke says, I went and spoke to these people. I listened to them. I took down their stories. He says later on that he carefully investigated everything, and he tells the story from the beginning. He claims to write an orderly account of the life of Jesus. Now we must understand, when Luke writes this, he's not writing religious literature. He's not sitting there waiting for God to inspire him to write something profound. He's writing the life story of Jesus. He didn't know what would happen to his account of the life of Jesus. He didn't know that his account of the life of Jesus would wind up in the Bible. Didn't know there would be a Bible 200-300 years later. He just wanted to capture the story, the life of Jesus. And we know from volume 2 of Luke's writing, which is the book of Acts, that he knew Peter, he knew James, the brother of Jesus. He traveled with Paul, who eventually wrote almost half the New Testament. And as Paul went around establishing churches around the Mediterranean, Luke went with. Luke tells us about Jesus, that Jesus claimed to know what God is like and who God likes. Now those are very important things to know, what God is like and who God likes. But what made the story so compelling to Luke, what made him want to tell the story, was what happened at the end. This is why he had to write it down. What happened at the end of the story makes sense of the entire story. And this is how the end of that story begins. In Luke 23, verse 33, it says, when they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there along with the other criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Now, the Bible doesn't go into great detail about the crucifixion. Doesn't need to, because the people of that day understood crucifixion. They understood the... it's off. 1, 2. Now it's on. The people of that day understood crucifixion. You didn't have to explain to them how crucifixion works. It's like if I had to tell you, I went to the dentist to get root canal. I don't have to explain to you the whole process of root canal. You know how it works. So for them, crucifixion was like that. You talked about crucifixion. They'd all seen crucifixion. They knew how crucifixions work. Crucifixion wasn't invented by the Romans. But they perfected it as a way of killing somebody over the longest time possible with the most amount of suffering. That's what crucifixion was meant to do. It was meant to kill you slowly and very painfully. So Jesus is being crucified. In Luke 23, verse 34, Luke reports, Jesus said something. Now, those who were reading this would have seen crucifixions, and they would have heard what people say when they are busy dying on the cross. All kinds of things that people would have said in that moment, that agony. What would Jesus say? Well, Luke tells us that Jesus said the most remarkable, the most unsettling thing imaginable, a thing that nobody could have predicted. And not only that, but Jesus invites us to follow him in this. And what Jesus said is so staggering that I think when Luke heard people say this is what he said, he stopped writing and said, what? Well, what did he say? But when you think about it, it makes perfect sense in the light of how Jesus lived, what he taught while he was still alive. Jesus died the same way he lived, and he invites us to do the same, to follow him. Jesus didn't become like the people who hated him. he invites us to do the same. So he says, when people mistreat you, when people don't treat you well, when people are nasty to you, when somebody considers you their enemy, don't return the favor. Don't return the favor. And if you've ever seen somebody act this way or do this, it's remarkable. It's humbling. We take note of it. We say, oh, I'm not sure if I could do that. What did Jesus say? Luke 23 and verse 34. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. They really don't know what's going on. They think they understand, but they really don't understand. Forgive them. And then Luke tells us that Jesus said this, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. And then he says, and they divided up his clothes by casting lots. So while Jesus is dying on the cross, in agony on the cross, he's forgiving those who do this to him, and they are min gepla. Carry on with their lives. What a loser Jesus was. Not so. By any standards, when the chips were down, if you looked at the scene, you would say, this is not a winning situation. Even when he was arrested, he didn't resist. His followers fled. Now, we shouldn't be surprised that this is how Jesus reacted, because Jesus died the way he lived. And this is how he wanted his followers to live and behave. And that's what we find so difficult. That's why Jesus has many admirers, but few followers. Jesus has many admirers, but few followers. And I'm going to ask you today, which are you? Are you an admirer of Jesus? In other words, do you see him as, a good moral teacher, somebody who you perhaps look up to, perhaps you think he's a remarkable person, or are you a follower? The way of Jesus is so unusual, it's so contrary to our expectations that it takes us by surprise. When you see someone who really knows what it means to be a Christian, behaving in the way that Jesus behaved, emulating his behavior, behaving like he did, forgiving his attackers, forgiving those who crucify him, it's jaw-dropping. It moves us. One such story, and I had a picture of him for the screen. One such story is the story of Maximilian Kolbe. Maximilian Kolbe was a Polish Roman Catholic priest who was taken captive by the Nazis in 1941 and sent to Auschwitz. He was forced to carry logs, and he injured himself and was lying on the ground, and they beat him to within an inch of his life. He didn't die, but he got sent to the infirmary. And in the infirmary, he heard the confessions of the people who were there, the sick and the dying people. He listened and he prayed for them, which was contrary to what the Nazis didn't want him to do that, but he did it anyway. The survivors spoke of his great generosity. He used to share the meager food that he had. He would share with everybody. He would give it away. But in July of 1941, the Nazis found that somebody had escaped from the camp. So what they did in such situations is they would round up 10 arbitrary people. They would strip them naked, and then they would put them in a bunker and let them die of starvation. And so this is what they did. Karl Fritz was the German officer, and he just picked 10 men at random, and they were going to now be led away to be starved to death. One of these men was a man named Francis Garonichek. And as he was led away, he pleaded, he said, my wife and children, what is going to happen to them? And Maximilian Kolbe, the Roman Catholic priest, the Polish priest, came forward, and he said, I'm a Catholic priest. I want to die for that man. I'm old, he said, although he was only 47 at the time. I'm old, and I have no children. He has a wife and children. And so Father Kolbe's dying wish was granted. He was put in the group of 10, and Francis Garonichek life was spared, the men were stripped naked and they were put into a dark cellar, into an underground bunker. But if the Nazis were expecting to hear cries of sorrow and anguish, people said they were disappointed. What Maximilian Kolbe did was he led those men in prayer. They used to sing hymns and pray as they were in this place. They were not fed. They were given no water or no food. It was anticipated they would die within a couple of days. But 2 weeks later, all 10 were still alive. All 10 were still singing hymns, and the Nazis had had enough. So they killed all of them. Maximilian Kolbe himself was killed by a fatal dose of poison injected into his system on the 14th of August, 1941. In the late part of the 20th century, John Paul II, at a ceremony in St. Peter's, declared Maximilian Kolbe a saint of the Roman Catholic Church. In fact, in the Roman Catholic Church, he is the patron saint of the 20th century. And at that service, which was attended by many, although he had passed away, were the children and grandchildren of the man he saved, Francis Goronichek. His children and his grandchildren were all present at that ceremony when Maximilian Kolbe was declared a saint. And when he spoke of Maximilian Kolbe, John Paul II said this: "The death of Maximilian Kolbe became a sign of victory. This was a victory won over all systemic contempt and hate for man and for what is divine in man, a victory like that won by our Lord Jesus Christ on Calvary." And some people might look at this and say, well, Maximilian Kolbe was a fool. But we know better, don't we? And Jesus invites all of us to be that better, to walk like that, to live like that, to be prepared to die like that. That's what it means to be a follower of Christ. In Luke chapter 9 and verse 23, Jesus says to his disciples, he says this, he says, "Whoever wants to be my disciple, whoever wants to come after me, whoever wants to play on my team, whoever wants to follow me, whoever wants to be my disciple," that's what it means to be a disciple. It means to play on Christ's team. It means to follow him. It means to go where he goes. Whoever wants to be part of my team must deny themselves. If you want to be a follower of Christ, you have to do the hardest thing in the world, and that is you have to deny yourself. You have to say no to you. You have to take the decision not to be ruled by your appetites. You have to take a decision to live differently to the people around you. He said to them, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross." Now, for us, this has become it's a kind of a phrase for us, you know. "Oh, you know, my husband's so difficult, he's my cross to bear." My wife never says that, by the way. Now, in Jesus' day, people understood the only people who picked up a cross were people who were going to die. You only carried a cross if you were going to be crucified. So when Jesus said, "If you want to follow me, you must pick up your cross," he's saying, if you want to follow me, you must be prepared to give up your life. And notice what he says about that. Take up their cross daily. It's not a once-off event. You don't do this once. Whoever wants to be my disciple, whoever wants to play on my team, whoever wants to come after me, must deny themselves, take up their cross daily, and follow me. And folks, those who took this to heart is why we are sitting here today. That's why we're here today. It's because in generation after generation, followers of Christ took this seriously and daily took up their cross and were prepared to give their lives for him. People who every single day submitted their independence to him, chose to live for him rather than themselves, to follow him wherever he leads them. Do we do this? Is this part of our experience? Or have we sort of fallen into the average of just being an admirer of Jesus rather than a follower? Even his own disciples ran away when he was arrested. They didn't understand what he wanted from them. And then Jesus, in that same passage in Luke 9, he changes tack slightly. He says, well, if you don't understand this, let me put it another way. And what he says next often resonates with me around funerals. I often do funerals of people I don't know, people who have no church connection, no church affiliation. And I sit usually over here and I listen to the eulogies. And sometimes it's wonderful to hear those eulogies, but sometimes it's really sad. As people kind of search around to say something nice about the person who's died. And I always think, gee, that's so sad. At the end of your life, those who loved you dearly, the only thing they could say to you is, she had a lovely garden. And she loved flowers, you know, and was kind to animals or something. So Jesus puts it this way. He says, whoever wants to save their life will lose it. He says, whatever you cling to, whatever you hold on to, whatever you grab to yourself diminishes over time. If you hoard seed, it doesn't yield anything, it rots. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. We can live for something bigger than ourselves, Jesus says. And when you see somebody living like this, it's amazing, it's attractive, and we say, oh, I wish I could do the same. I wish I could emulate that. I wish I could live like that. I wish I could live at that level. Jesus says, that's what I'm inviting you to. It's the invitation of a lifetime. To live for something bigger than yourself, something wider than yourself. What good? He then puts it another way. He says, well, if you don't quite understand that, let me put it this way. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet to lose or to forfeit their very self? He says, skip to the end of your life. Let's say you gain everything you ever wanted. Let's say you achieved every goal you ever wanted, every dream you've ever wanted for yourself. Let's say you achieve every single one of them. You can do all of that, but lose your way. You can achieve every single thing you've ever wanted to achieve, but lose your way. You can think you're on the winning side, and at the end of your life, find out you weren't even in the game. And Jesus says, that's no good. And Jesus says, I'm not inviting you to life 2.0. I'm not inviting you to a sort of a little upgrade of your life. I'm inviting you to something completely different, something much bigger, something much grander, something much more exciting, something much more substantial than a small life. It's a whole new order of living, a whole new way of life. Jesus is playing to lose. Jesus is playing to lose. And in doing so, he won everything. He invites us to do the same, to live a life so much bigger, so much more durable, so much more satisfying than a life spent scrolling away as much as I can to make my life easier. A life in which I choose to give away that which I cannot keep anyway. You know, life is a terminal disease. Life is a terminal disease. 1 out of 1 die. Every one of us. Nobody's getting out of here alive. Reality number 1. Reality number 2. You take nothing with you. Jesus says, you're not going to take it with you, so give it away while you can. Father, back to Luke 23. Jesus says, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. They think they know what it's all about, but they really don't. Luke tells us the people stood around watching. The rulers sneered at him. They said, he saved others. Let him save himself if he's God's Messiah, the chosen one. If he's a king, they say, let him act like a king. But he's an imposter. The soldiers come up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, if you are the king of the Jews, save yourselves. The soldiers get on the act. Even the criminals, one of the criminals there hurled insults at him. Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us. Even he gets in on the scene. What they didn't realize is that if Jesus chose to save himself, which he could have in that moment, he would have saved nobody else. If Jesus had in that moment chosen to save himself, nobody else would have been saved. Jesus forfeited himself to save you and to save me. He was the man for others, who placed others first, even to the end of his life. I want to ask you to put your hand up, but who knows the name of the emperor when Jesus was crucified? And don't go with Caesar. Caesar's a title, not a name. Which Caesar was in charge? I'm not going to tell you. You can go and look it up if you don't know. But let me tell you, the only reason you know that, the name of that person who was the most powerful person in the world at the time, the only reason you know who that person is because he lived at the same time as the man being crucified. Otherwise, his name would have just disappeared into some dusty history book and people would remember it as part of history. The only reason we know it is because of the one who was crucified. And in the cross, the kingdoms of this world are clash with the kingdom of God. The two are in conflict with one another. And the kingdom of God wins. But the question I want for you to answer today is, who are you going to follow? What are you going to live for? Who is going to be the boss of you? Is it your ambition, your need for success, your appetites, your career? Are you going to be an admirer of Jesus? Somebody who looks up to him? Or a follower? One who makes a daily decision to follow Jesus, to do as he did. Because friends, followers change the world, not admirers. Followers change the world. You see, admirers, what they do is they take bits and pieces of Jesus' life. It's like a buffet. It's like I take this bit and that bit and I don't like this and I leave that out. So I pick and I choose what I like about Jesus' life and I sort of put that together and I say, well, those are the parts that I'll keep for myself. Followers don't do that. Followers submit their whole lives to Christ. Folks, why should the rest of the world take the Christian faith seriously if we don't take it seriously enough? Why would the rest of the world be attracted to something if we are half-hearted? Luke 23:44. It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. The sun stopped shining. The curtain of the temple was torn in two. This was something nobody saw coming. The curtain in the temple was ripped from top to bottom. The thing that separated the Holy of Holies from the holy place in the temple, right in the front of the temple, that curtain, big, thick curtain that hung there, was torn from top to bottom. A sign that God was leaving the temple to find his lost sheep, to find the lost coin, to find the lost son. God was not going to be in the temple anymore. God was going to move from the temple into the streets to find those who had been lost. The era of the temple had come to an end. Jesus called out with a loud voice, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. When he had said this, he breathed his last. In verse 48 of Luke 23, Luke says, when all the people who had gathered to witness this sight saw what took place, they beat their breasts and went away. They were overcome with sorrow, grief, frustration. But all those who knew him, Luke tells us, including the woman who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance watching these things. Jesus died the way he lived. his arms wide open, welcoming everyone. The cross took his breath away. The cross took his life away, but his death took our sin away. And his resurrection took all our excuses away. So I wanted to ask you this morning as I close, are you an admirer or are you going to be a follower of Jesus? Admirers look up to. Admirers take bits and pieces. Admirers give part of themselves. Followers take the whole package deal. They give their entire life to him. They submit every part of it to him. The good, the bad, the ugly, everything that's there they give to him. They say it's all yours. And daily choose to give up their lives for him. Daily choose to live for him. Daily choose to put his the needs of others, the priorities of the kingdom in front of their own, who daily choose not to be ruled by their appetites, or by their need for success, or ambition, or power, or anything else, or acceptance. Let's pray. Father, these are easier things to talk about than to do. And when we read the accounts of what Jesus did on the cross, when we read the stories of Father Maximilian Kolbe and others, we feel shamed. Because although we'd like to think that we would act that way if we were ever in that situation, truth be told, we're not sure if we would. But Father, I pray that you will help us. Help us to be followers, not just admirers. People who not only look to Jesus, and not only admire him from afar, but who seek every day to follow him, to put the priorities of the kingdom first in our lives, to put Jesus first in our lives, to submit all of our lives to him. Father, I pray that you will help each of us to do that in our lives daily, to pick up our cross and to follow you. For we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.